Hi, I'm Jono McNeil and I'm a session singer, a vocal coach and a singer-songwriter. It's a very good question because I've always loved music, and even as a child, like a little baby, I would sit next to our massive big, oversized 80s speakers and I would listen to the music, and then when the music would stop, we had cassette players back then, and the tape would stop and I would say tape, tape, and it was actually my first word, my parents having to turn the tape over so I could keep listening to music and I could go into my little kind of drowsy state where I just kind of absorbed all this amazing stuff. I'm sure it wasn't all that cool, but anyway, I loved music back then, and then as I grew into myself a little bit, I started to want to take up some instruments, and my focus was much more instrumentally based, and so I would look at flute and piano, and I ended up focusing on double bass in a big way, and all quite classical. The closest thing I had to singing was my school choir, which was quite good, to be honest. We won some awards and stuff like that, but I was singing bass, never got a solo, was probably quite inconspicuous in the whole thing. But then I decided that actually, do you know what, I liked this a bit more than everyone was letting me think. And I got some singing lessons with an amazing classical singer. His name was Cornelius de Monk, the most impressive name I've ever heard to date. And his voice would rock the room. It was so resonant and really opened my eyes to what possibilities there were in the singing voice, and just kind of whet my appetite. I wanted more and more. But then it wasn't until I got into a band and started touring and whatnot that I really started to discover that singing was everything to me. I loved it, and I guess when I think about what I really loved about it, unlike any of the instrumental work I'd done, for me, when I open up my mouth and when I kind of feel that voice release, it feels like a true honest expression of my creative soul as well, and that's really important to me. I've always considered myself as a creative person, so it's my access point, it's my vehicle, I guess. So I guess I'm a product of an educated process when it comes to music. I went to music school as a high school student, got a scholarship, and then I went eventually to university. But my first degree was actually in primary school teaching. I wasn't absolutely sure that music and being a full-time performer was everything that I wanted to do. And probably at that point, at 18, I wasn't quite good enough. So it was actually after I'd been touring for a few years and had really gotten quite integrated into the music industry that I thought, do you know what, I need to add some more knowledge to what I do. So I applied for a really great university in Western Australia that had a very reputable jazz and contemporary music program, and just kind of threw myself into that. And that was really great. I think I had my mind blown open, having come from a really classical perspective, and then learning about jazz and about contemporary music theory, and also just being in this kind of intense situation where you're having to grow so quickly. It was a real acceleration time that I don't think I will have experienced in any other part of my life. So that kind of period of time was so important for me. And then, of course, the networks and just being around musicians all the time. I guess I had a similar kind of thing, but it wasn't perhaps around musicians that were really attuned to want to grow every day, that they were studying. That was really special. So for me, I think the institutional process and to go to university to study music was hugely beneficial and filled in a lot of gaps that I had in my knowledge. Nearly every day of my life, I use some part of that program that I went on to, and I loved it. I went on and did some postgraduate stuff afterwards as well. Sometimes you get a real appetite for more knowledge and you want to keep on growing, and I think university provides you with a real opportunity to do that if it's a good one. There's plenty of universities that can dash people's hopes as well, but I feel like I had a really positive experience. The institutional process, I don't believe, is for everyone. But I think it's for a lot of aspiring musicians, if I'm honest. I've had the privilege of bumping into and working besides and working with musicians with incredible innate ability and instinct for how to move forward with their careers, with their musical growth, musical development. But I tend to find for those who want to pursue a musical career, that tends to be more in the minority. Those that do sometimes try that process without filling in all the gaps that education can provide, I think sometimes have holes in their knowledge, and it does show. I don't think that there's one way up the mountain when it comes to the music industry and being a musician, and actually I think, you know, having something and not dissecting it can keep and preserve the beauty of it. And actually some people just need to have the idea of music and the idea of creating music as something that is left untouched and undissected. You know, not kind of splayed all over a lab, you know, bench, you know what I mean? But that being said, I am a part of an institution that educates musicians, and I think we do it quite well. I think the kind of experience that I experienced when I was just around a community of growing musicians, all developing, when I was around lots of input that I was getting daily, I think the students also experienced the same thing as I experienced, and that is increased, accelerated growth within a short period of time. And then there's some really great institutions out there as well that link students up with the industry contacts, and that gives a real leg up to a lot of people that perhaps would be otherwise undiscovered. And I think the networks and those contacts add an extra arm or wing to the institutional process.